What is up, YouTube? Today we're going over the Champions League Fukuoka top 16 list that just occurred over in Japan on February 17th and 18th. This is a tournament that had some of our new Temporal Forces cards, and it's our first display of post-rotation play. Important things to note before we look at the deck list and talk about what happened. There was 3,200 players registered, only 2,655 showed up. The entire tournament was best of one all the way through. 7-2 players who had a record of 7-2 advanced from day 1 to day 2, and then if you had a record of 12-2, you made it to top 16. It was a top 16 cut afterwards, and only one player at 11-3 did make it, and that player did top 4. Another important thing to note is that from day 1 to day 2, players were allowed to change decks completely if they'd like. So let's say in day 1 you played Lost Box, and by day 2 you realized, okay, I got lucky to get to 7-2, my deck's actually not that strong, the metagame isn't what I thought it was going to be. You could change decks and just play something like Arceus instead, and no one would bat an eye. That being said, take all these results with a grain of salt because best of one is a little bit of a fierce object. I did stream both days of the Fukuoka Champions League on the YouTube channel. It should be under live on my videos in the VOD section, and there is a video up for the finals, which you can find up there. Just click on it, watch it if you want to. I think it's a good idea if you're prepping for tournaments like EUIC, Orlando, Perth, in the next format coming up, to just get a little bit of an idea of what you're expecting, how games are flowing compared to what the current format is, because you guys will be shocked at how different the game is when cards like Battle VIP Pass and Mew VMAX and Path to the Peak no longer exist in the format. That was a long-winded intro. Thanks for coming to my channel, guys. If you enjoy this kind of content, please like and subscribe. We're going to just jump through all these top 16 lists and look at some of the senior ones as well that are uploaded, just because I think it's cool. I think every list here is uploaded besides the 5th place and the 9th place lists, which when they show up, we'll deal with them later. But let's go ahead and kick it off with the first place winner list, Daisuke Kubo. Kubo-san played Lugia Cinccino. Cinccino is a new card from the set Temporal Forces that does 70 times the number of special energy cards attached to this Pokemon, not special energy itself, so a double triple energy does not count as 2. It only counts as 1 special energy card. But Cinccino is now the answer that Lugia has to one-shot anything in the format, including Charizard EX, which was a little bit of a problem to one-shot if you played the single strike version, and if you played colorless, you didn't have a great matchup there anyway. But now with Snorlax to deal with Lost Box decks and Cinccino to one-shot everything, including Arceus decks, Master Ball makes its debut as a spec and rounds out this list. There no longer is Professor Burnett in the deck, but using cards like Jacques, we can put the 2 Arceus in our hand and use cards like Ultra Ball to go ahead and get the Arceus into the discard and set up our board that way. It's a little bit scuffed, but trust me, it works. He's the guy who won, high rolled a little bit, but Lugia does seem absolutely insane as a deck. And, you know, my group loves to play Lugia, so you might see us have a little bit of fun. 4 Double Turbo, 4 Jet is pretty stable, and I think 4 Gift. Most of the colorless energies that are really good are right there. You only really need 1 V-Guard. You could probably up the count now that that Arceus is a little bit more popular in Japan, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So V-Guard does make that matchup significantly better, especially on your Lugias. But I think you want to be attacking with the Cincinos anyway, and just one-shotting them. So the V-Guard doesn't really matter there because you're going to get one shot in return. Mist Energy is really cool because now you don't get absolutely throttled by Roaring Moon or by Giratina V-Star. So Mist Energy becomes really strong in those matchups because Moon can't necessarily play Temple of Sinnoh, I think, compared to Pokestop, but Arceus decks can play Sinnoh if they're playing Giratina V-Star, and Giratina V-Star can play Sinnoh in the Lost Box version. And then there's Therapeutic Energy for the 1 for Snorlax. So you could probably bounce around this Mist Energy count, make like 2 Therapeutic or like 2 V-Guard if you want to flex some of those counts. I think there should be more research in here for sure than just 2 Serena. But overall, I do like the deck at all. I think Lugia is a good deck. And if you guys are Lugia believers, welcome back. It's been a long time, right? Second place, we had Arceus, Alolan Vulpix. Just straight. There's no other things like Guja or something else. It's just straight Arc Vulpix. Vulpix still being a very good attacker into decks like Charizard. Most decks in the format don't really have a great answer to Vulpix still because there's no escape rope anymore, so you can't really escape rope and bring things back into the active. But there are still decks like Iron Hands. Cinccino obviously shreds through it. There are decks that deal with this card pretty well. It's just that if you hit the right matchups, you will win games. And in Japan, where Best of One was a little bit more popular, you can kind of snowball that. This is one of the few decks that can still play Lost City pretty reliably. It looks like this player played heavy counts of both Turo and Sharon's, so 3 recovery cards. So basically just trying to keep the loop going between the attackers and just making sure they don't lose that way. I do like the inclusion of Airy, which was a really cool like turn 2 if you have the Arceus V-Star already ready to go. With Starbirth, you can go get Airy and rip an important card out of your opponent's hand and stunt their setup, especially something like Charizard where they're going to go ahead and Rotom. And if you Airy away like a candy or like even 2 candies, the game just kind of ends for Charizard because now they can't really produce a ton of attackers in a row. This player chose to play Prime Catcher over things like Max Belt, which I do quite like because you can just keep chaining Gust, and with 4 Boss and a Prime Catcher, you're putting a ton of pressure on a lot of decks. He's also choosing to play 2 copies of Mist Energy, which is just good for the Giratina V-Star again, 1 copy of V-Guard for Giratina and the Mirror Match, and then 2 copies of Medical Energy, which I don't know what they're in there for just yet, but it does heal 30 damage from one of your Pokemon when you attach it, so maybe that fixes some numbers that I don't know entirely what they're for yet, but otherwise I think the list looks pretty crazy good. And I think if you're an Arc player, you have reason to rejoice. But I think now it's like on the map, so it might not nearly be as good. Taduyoshi Kosho-san ended up playing Snorlax Block Stall. A pretty stock standard list here. No Mantine included to bring Pokemon from the discard back into the active, but focusing on a heavier airy build where you're just trying to rip cards out of your opponent's hand while using Block Lax in the active. Maybe give up a couple of prizes here and there. 3 copies of Sinnoh, so we're really choosing to just get rid of some of the problem child here. No copies of Giacomo, because I guess no deck really benefits off of having special energy on the board anymore. Maybe Giacomo is better for Arceus, but there's just no copies of it in this list particularly. 2 MF Sisters, maybe flipping the Airy and MF Sisters count is better. 2 copies of Eric's Invitation, which I like quite a bit because now you have no way to get supporters out of your prize cards if they are prized. There's like no Pioneer or anything anymore. I guess you could play like Daisy's Help, and like Rotom Phone or something. I don't know, man. Like you could do weird shenanigans, but like those cards aren't good to play. And you have 2 Palpad, 2 Silene, and a Yell's Cheer still, so you still have your like recycle capability. And then besides that, everything else is like pretty stock standard. I think Chi-Yu is really good for milling cards late game. Crabominable has rotated. I think Chi-Yu is better overall anyway. You can opt to play a card like Radzard to take prizes in the end game or knock out a big threat at some point. But the problem with that is if you open it, the game is pretty much over because you have to dedicate like a penny or a switch card or something to getting it out of the active, which I guess you can Arvin for like, I don't know, Tool switch card or something. But that way you're not like nest balling for a Rotom or a Snorlax or something you need. Hero Escape is really good for this deck because you can Hero Escape a lot of things. Like now your Mimikyu is really beefy, goes to 160, deals or 170, sorry, deals with a lot of shred effects. Snorlax goes to 250, really hard to KO as well. So now you have these things that you can penny up wherever your Hero Escape is, and if your Hero Escape stays in play and doesn't get vacuumed, it's kind of a menacing threat. So that being said, this is Stall. This is a good skeleton for it. I think I like the way this is built. Artisan, I'm not the biggest fan of that yet, but I could be sold on it. Consistency is good. Kenta-san ended up top 4ing from the 16th seed, which was very impressive as one of the only 11 threes to make it in the cut. And he chose to play Bibzard. But the first thing that strikes out to me about this list that I don't like immediately is a 1 copy of TM Evo. I feel like if you're going to play Bibzard with 2 Charmeleon and 2 Bib, you want to commit heavier to the Evo on turn 2, so why not play more copies of Evo? That being said, the rest of the list is pretty stock standard. No Lumineon, no Rotom. Opting for no 4 Sealstone targets, but choosing to play a heavier Bidoof line to get the ball set up and get rolling, while you have heavy Ionos and Arvin to just get set up. And then you have Cryptomaniacs Deciphering to put 2 cards on top of your deck, whatever 2 cards you might need to close out the game with Bibarel. So in tandem with Bibarel, you'll see a couple of those 2 cards, and you can basically either chain another Candy Zard, get a Charmeleon into play, get that Prime Catcher that you need. Vitality Band is the tool of choice to get up 10 more damage. No copies of Max Belt because Prime Catcher's in the deck, so you're not hitting early knockouts on things like Chan Pao or Iron Hands. And no copies of Defiance Band or Choice Belt or anything, so the damage is for sure a little bit more capped than other builds for Arceus or for Charizard, so I don't know if I like that necessarily, but besides that, this is a good list for Charizard Bib. The Skwovet is being played to deal with mill decks primarily, not so much like I mean, it's playing every barrel line, so why not, right? Like, copy the logic of Arceus and just put the cards back into the deck, but I think it's primarily that mill has gotten a little bit big in Japan. 5th place was Kento Imao-san, and we don't have their list. 6th place was Hajime Fujiwara, and they were playing Arc Tina. This is a pretty stock standard list. It looks like Max Belt to hit extra damage. Giratina can hit 330 onto a Charizard EX pretty early on in the game. 2 TM Devos, probably to deal with decks like Chien-Pao and Charizard, because if you just Devo their board, like one time, they're like, okay, whatever. They go on their third Candy Zard potentially. If they get a Charmeleon up, they can go use that one. But like if they go Charmeleon up, you just Giratina that one first, take that out, and they're like, okay, cool, let's go into the next Zard, and then you just Iron Leaves that one. So you have plenty of time that you buy by playing it that way. This build leaned heavily into the Airy with 2 Airy and 4 copies of Judge. There's no disruption stadiums or anything, so we're just trying to disrupt them early and often, and just try to use the Arctina Bib strategy of just my deck is going to be more powerful than yours. Radiant Gardevoir making its way into the deck to deal with both. I mean, I don't think Lugia matters necessarily as much because if they go first and get the knockout or hit you for 200 anyway, they're going to be ahead. But I guess it prevents them from taking a free knockout for 220. But you are helping in Giratina Mirror by forcing them to have an additional modifier to knock out your V-Star compared to theirs. And then Iron Leaves is all like just very, very good for the Charizard matchup. And this deck can already synergize off the back of it. 4 Grass is a little bit low, but Iron Leaves can move any energy, which makes it just a little bit stronger. In 7th place was also another Arctina deck. This one is a little bit different with copies of Grabber. So Airy plus Grabber is the strategy they were choosing to use as soon as they can in the game and try to rip as many cards out of your opponent's hand and make it difficult for them to actually play the game that they want to play. With a heavier arc line, just 4/4 Thickums getting in there. No copies of Lumineon, just committing entirely to getting the ball rolling. Lost City is the stadium of choice. Being able to just get rid of an important threat potentially down the game. Maybe against like Ancient Box, they play like 1 copy of Great Tusk or 1 copy of Slitherwing, and that could be a little bit of a problem because that Slitherwing could come back up and one-shot your Arceus. You can just get rid of that. Or you can play against a deck that uses Radzard early on, and often you can just Iron Leaves or just use it to get rid of it with Lost City as well. This is a cool version as well. I think you could try out both of these. One player is opting to just have your Nest Ball or Ultra Ball counts. The other player choosing to play a full grip of both balls and capturing aromas because early game, you need to get that Arceus into play. So this is 8 or 10 outs in addition to what you already have to find that Arceus. So one has more supporters, one has less. So you guys can take your pick and try it out if you're an Arceus enjoyer. Snorlax Stall taking 8th place as well here. This one's got the Mantine and the Mawile to play a little bit more of a cheesy strategy, but still the 3 Airy, 2 MF Sister split is still prevalent here with the 2 Erika's Invitations, but this one does not play any copies of Silene or Yelchir, meaning that the loop of the deck is Pidgeot plus Palpads. Like you're just going to be Pidgeotting cards back in and Palpadding your pieces, but once you're out of resources, they are finite with this build. You don't get to infinite loop like all your Aries or all of your MF Sisters. Like you don't get to Silene or Yelts cheer them back. You have the finite amount of resources, and then you have to win the game off of Pidgeot looping with cards like Mawile when your opponent can't necessarily do something like that. So it's a little bit of a different strategy, and I don't like this one nearly as much as like the other one. I think having Silene and Yelchir and cards like that lets you have a little bit more of a concrete strategy versus basically making your gameplay. And I have to have Mawile stick, or I have to have Blocklax stick something in the active. And that's my game plan. So I don't like that necessarily. 9th place, we had an Ancient Box with Naoto Takahashi-san, but we don't see the list, so we're just going to move on. 10th place, we had another stall, but we had a Noivern EX. If you guys don't know what Noivern EX does, it's Covert Flight 70, prevent all basic Pokemon damage, and then a 140 with Dominant Echo. They can't play Special Energy or Stadium cards, and with no colored energy, it looks like the idea was that you have Covert Flight to just beat any deck that is only basic Pokemon like Future Box or Ancient Box potentially. You just attack with Noivern for the entire game and win the game because Stall I don't think has the greatest matchup into Ancient Box or Future Box, which play a ton of basic energy. You have Mantine and Squovet. Squovet deals with Mill, so this was a little bit more text for Mill. 1 Silene, 1 Yelchir, so you still have some recycle capabilities. 2 Erika's Invitation, a 2-2 split of the MF Sisters and Airy, so a little bit thinner on some of those lines, but still wants to have every single thing included in here. You can see how thin the one-ofs are spread. 2 Jets and 2 Mists, just making it so we don't get our Noivern popped by something like Roaring Moon's Gouging, Frenzied Gouging, basically just like making it hard for them to play the game. Mimikyu being an absolute menace, and there's 2 of them in this version. No Chi-Yu for the Mill strategy, but we're just opting to either take prizes with Noivern in the matchups that are tough for us, or just block lack some people out of the game. So this is a cool version. I never thought about Noivern, so I'm glad I got to meet it. In 11th place, we had Ryuki Okada-san playing Giratina. So if you're a Giratina enjoyer, it is not dead just yet. 3/3 Giratina, 4/1 one of the attackers, 1 Greninja, and 1 Iron Leaves, along with the Manaphy. basically playing a heavy split of the same supporters you've been seeing in Giratina for quite a while, but there's addition of 1 Iono, only 2 Poffin compared to the 4 VIP pass that the deck used to play, but Poffin is so instrumental in getting turn 1 Comfies out, but that's the only thing it gets out. Turn 1 Comfies, and I guess Manaphy. 4 copies of Nestball, which means it does help for an earlier turn 1 to get Tina's or Greninja into play, which are both very crucial to keep the game going. There's 1 copy of Forest Sealstone that's very intriguing to me because that card is not that good and takes away from the ability to use Star Requiem, but we have access to actually play the game more often than not, which I like as a card. 1 copy of Vacuum is actually really cool. I thought that would be a good inclusion back into Giratina because you can get to 7 or 10 much quicker without having to basically use a turn of Abyss Seeking, which might not be as great in this metagame where things can hit you a lot harder and a lot faster. Prime Catcher being the tool of choice does not surprise me. Max Belt was another consideration because you could Max Belt 330 at Charizard, but besides that, I think that the Prime Catcher makes perfect sense. Emergency Board, also a really good card here. Make it so that our Comfy gets 1 less retreat cost and just able to just move around as a free pivot, and having a free pivot is really nice in a deck like this. Besides that, the energy makes sense to me. 3 water is good because we can put a ton of pressure on with Greninja. Artisan is a good stadium of choice. No Sinnoh is a little bit concerning if we can't use our V-Star on certain things. So having Sinnoh plus Roxanne and maybe V-Starring like a gift energied attacker or a mist energied attacker is really good in a lot of situations. So maybe that needs to be reevaluated. But besides that, the list is pretty good. In 12th place, we have Takeru Yamano playing a Great Tusk Mill deck you might not expect. Great Tusk, if you guys don't know, has Crown Collapse. Discard the top card of your opponent's deck. If you play an Ancient Supporter, discard 3 more cards. So we're just an absolute menace of a deck that just mills a ton of cards every single turn. Great Tusk has 140 HP, which is pretty easy to knock out. But when you couple it with cards like Bravery Charm, it goes to 190, or the Ancient Booster Capsule, which goes to 200. And this deck plays 1 copy of Comfy as a pivot to go through your deck with the Emergency Board as a pivot. With Trekking Shoes, just dig, get to your DTEs, get to your basic energies. You can use Sada or Explorer's Guidance every single turn. You choose not to deck with cards like Pidgeot, so Pidgeot keeps the loop going. So you go draw for turn, use like Sada, Pidgeot back into the deck, draw for turn, like, I don't know, Explorer's Guidance again, do something else. I don't know if an area is necessarily good. I guess you just mill 2 more switch outs. If you hit like switch cards in their hand because you have counter catchers. So if you see like a switch and a switch card or something, you've just milled 2 more of your opponent's ways to continue playing the game. So it's an interesting addition. 2 Palpad to keep the supporter chain going. But an overall very cool deck and a very cool concept. And I think Mill has to be respected because it did perform quite well. Maybe it's just because it was BO1, but I think Mill is a real deck. So you guys should not be sleeping on it. Then we had Keishi-san, Yamada-san playing Bibzard again here. Bibzard being a little bit more popular in Japan than other places with a 3/3 Bibero line. There's an Iron Bundle here which acts as an escape rope in a lot of situations for the deck. Heavier counts of everything besides Arven, which is a little bit weird to me because I think Arven is one of the best cards in the deck. 4 Poffin, 4 Ultra Ball, 3 Nest Ball is pretty consistent to just get the board set up when you need it to be set up. 3 Candy in Bibzard, no Evo, so we're not routing for the Evo. We're just trying to get as many Bibs up and running and get to our Candy plus Charizard combination using the Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. There's a Pidgeot V as their Sealstone target, as well as Luminion. So no Rotom. The Clogs are Vengeance sits there for multiple turns. We want to use Vanishing Wings and put the guy away as soon as possible. And then a Squovet as well to keep drawing with the barrels. 1 copy of Countercatcher, 2 copies of Boss. Pretty stock standard. I like all those things. Defiance Band is our 1 modifier. Maybe we want another one in addition to all that. Max Belt might not be the best, but I think maybe like a Choice Belt or Vitality Band could be good to hit numbers. But otherwise, I think this is a cool version of the deck. Unfortunately, we had Ryoma Ichihara-san playing Future Box, the first instance of Future Box. Iron Crown bumps up all of our future attacks by 20 damage. Miraidon attacks for 40 damage and attaches 2 basic energies from our deck to one of our Pokemon. And then we keep the energies in play with a Heavy Baton, where our Pokemon with 4 retreat cost gets attacked and knocked out. We move 3 basic energies to one of our bench Pokemon, so we just keep chaining Iron Hands if possible, while Gift Energy draws us a bunch of cards to keep the ball rolling. 4 Arven, 4 Research, 3 Iono gives us a ton of cards to find supporters along with find cards along with Mortys to discard a card and draw more cards. 4 Generator, 4 Countercatcher, and 4 Technoradar just means that we're going to be able to keep gusting things into the active, try to play from behind a little bit, and end the game by taking an additional prize with Iron Hands. Reboot Pod puts energies onto the board when we need it to be there, and then Future Booster Capsule is the free retreater that we need, and plus 20 damage with the town store. So a very like aggressive build that's just built to beat your opponent's face in. It's like the new Miraidon of the format. So you guys can try that out if you were a Miraidon player. 15th is Charizard Pidgeot. Very much built like we've seen it before in this current format for Arven. The Pokemon line is almost exactly what it's been for quite a while now. The 3 Iono, the 3 Boss, like pretty much stock standard. The Roxanne's a little bit of a new inclusion. Don't know if I like that quite a bit, but 4 Poffin take the place of 4 VIP Pass, 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Candy, 3 Nest Ball. Very much the same as what we've been playing so far. 1 Lost City making its way back into the deck over the Artisan. This build is playing a Hero's Cape, which I don't know if I necessarily like, which puts our Charizard at like 430 HP. But I think Prime Catcher or Max Belt is just better in a lot of situations. So maybe it's just a little bit of a cope to play this Hero's Cape and just say like, hey, we're going to just one-shot you anyway with our big attackers. Last but not least, we have Lost Box with some of the more common attackers in the build. We have the Hands, Moon, and the Raikou as the 3 attackers. People weren't playing too much Lost City as you saw from the top 16. That might change in the future if decks like this become more popular, or if Flutterman becomes more popular. This will shut this deck down quite a bit. There's 2 Sableye as your backup attacker, but there's only 2 Psychic in the deck. A little bit of a weird inclusion count, but it's fine. 1 Greninja, 1 Bundle as a rope card as well in this situation. 4 Colors, 2 Roxanne. No copies of Boss's Orders, but you do have the Prime Catcher for later in the game. There is everything else is Lost Box stock standard. 3 Poffin over the 4 VIP Pass makes sense to me because you need to max that Nest Ball count over things like Buddy Poffin, because Buddy Poffin only gets you Manaphy and Comfy in Lost Box decks anymore, which you need to find the other stuff. You got to find the juice. You got to keep it going. Crisis Punch is a very cool inclusion. I think that card is very, very good in Lost Box decks. So, yeah. That's all the Masters deck list. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's just take a look at the Senior Champion with Ancient Box. This is a cool build. It's got all the main attackers of Ancient Box, Slitherwing, and Great Tusk as techs to round out the game. But besides that, you have the basic Darks. You have the Ancient Booster Capsules, the Defiance Bands, the Awakening Drum. As aggro as you can get with the Pokestops, plus the heavy set of items, and then you can just chain into the Sadas to get the ball rolling. Second place, we had a Lost Box list as well. You see the Ditto coming into play here, which acts as a 5th Comfy, or I guess a Radiant Greninja if you need it to be in this situation. A little bit more of the same across the board. You have a Gear in here as well. This list is choosing to play a Boss's Orders, which I do like quite a bit. 2 Cram is also pretty good. There's no Crisis Punch in here, but there is a additional copy of Emergency Board, so you can cut that and make that swap, and I like the list quite a bit. Hero also chose to play something very similar here. More of the same attackers here, Hands, Moon, and Raikou being our Sealstone target. There's a TM Devo over Crisis Punch in this one, so we're choosing to use Devo as our strategy against Charizard, or Chien-Pao as opposed to just facing them head on. Besides that, everything else looks pretty similar to me. 1 Roxanne as well, which is a cool inclusion. And then finally, we had Rinto playing Goodra. Comfy Goodra seems pretty solid now. Goodra seems to get quite a bit better with no escape rope in the format, so being able to hit Goodra in the active is a little bit more tough. And with Mist Energy, you can't get Frenzied Gouging or Star Requiemed, so now you have a little bit more grounds to stay alive. And then Hero's Cape makes your Goodra near invincible, and with a deck like this, if you can hold your Moisture Star V-Star power, then you can just keep that one Goodra taking maybe 4 or 5 prizes while you set up behind it, and then you can finish up the game with Sableye or Zamazenta in the early, mid, or late game. So that is all the Fukuoka Champions League list. Hopefully you guys got some insight into the new format. I'll be doing a lot of Temporal Forces content. Let me know in the comments below what you guys would like to see. It helps me make videos for you guys while I'm home for the next month or so before Vancouver. So thank you for watching. As always, please like and subscribe, and peace out.